This video is probably the most important video I'll be making this year about how to heal and how to grow after a breakup. It's an extensive video. I'm gonna share with you some models, some ideas and concepts that you need to know if you find yourself having a hard time dealing with a breakup, having a hard time to deal with relationships with your ex, with people around you. That idea of loneliness, for example, that makes you feel really uncomfortable, really unsettled. It's the video you need to watch on the topic. I'll explain everything after the jingle.
IGetMyExBack.com. Everyone deserves a second chance.
First of all, before I get into the nitty-gritty of that video, I want to emphasize that I am an optimistic person. And I do love rom-coms, I do love love stories. That's why I love my job. I love love stories. And I want you to find love, to be successful in a relationship, to rescue a relationship if it's worth fighting for this relationship. But I also want you to know that sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes it's better if you don't rescue the relationship. Sometimes you might be trying to rescue the relationship for the wrong reasons. This is why this video is very important. You might not get back with your ex, but you might learn a lot today. Your relationship with a relationship, this is what we're going to talk about today. The concept of codependency. And codependency is shaped in childhood. It doesn't have to be a trauma. It doesn't have to be from someone who's had a traumatic experience with no parents, an orphan or whatever. No. It could be some tiny events, and I'll give you some examples later on. Tiny events in your life as a child where you, and I always see it where you felt like you were not loved enough. And I see it as a spectrum. Some people will be very codependent, some people will be slightly codependent. We all have a share of that codependency. And as I said, and I guarantee this deck, when I wrote it, I felt like this is going to really, really help people. And I hope it does. This next slide will honestly change your life. So how codependency works. The idea of growing with a lack of emotional support from your primary attachment figure. So it's basically your mother or your father. Growing with the lack of love, feeling of safety, recognition, encouragement, autonomy. For example, I have a client, happy childhood, 2 siblings, she's the only girl. And when I ask her to talk to me about her relationship with her parents or with her father, she'll tell me, the only thing I remember about my childhood is like anytime I was coming back home with an exam, my father would be like, that's not good enough. Or anytime I would try to do something, drive, or that was never good enough. And she grew up with this idea that she wasn't good enough. Right? She had an amazing childhood. Happily, they had quite a good lifestyle and education and loving parents. They are still married. But her relationship with her father and those episodes, it doesn't have to be, I don't think his father was necessarily narcissistic, manipulative, bad, but for some reason, he pushed her down. Okay? Maybe just clumsy. Sometimes, and I feel sometimes so hard when you're a father, sometimes we might do things that hurt our children and we don't realize that. Okay? And some, because for example, like his brother would react in a different way, would find other mechanisms to defend himself. So it's very important that sometimes we have those stories, they have those encounters with our parents, and it's the time when we feel we need to be important to our partners. We need to be the little kings, right? We need to be at the center of attention. And so when we have this lack of love, feeling of safety, recognition, etc., this is what we create, this belief of I am not good enough. This creates this feeling of anxiety, of insecurity whenever you're alone, because you need that validation. And our instinct is to fight our fear at all costs. That's what we do. And it depends on our fear. But when you grow up with that idea of you're not good enough, it's this fear of abandonment. And so that pushes us to adopt toxic behaviors like manipulation, sacrifice, putting yourself before, putting your partner in front of you, over-charming, controlling, being really like, who are you texting? Who are you seeing? Always really being super jealous, for example. It's because we have this fear of like, he's gonna leave me. He's gonna cheat on me because I am not good enough. And we scan for threats every single day of our life. And it could apply in relationship with your friends, relationship with your boss, with your coworkers. It could apply in every aspect of your life. That's why I think this video is super important. And I want you to use this video as sort of a forum of discussion. I'd love you to, if you want to contribute, and I know now we are a big community now, and I'm very grateful that we are a community of supportive people, caring for each other and always willing to help each other. I would love for you to share a bit of your story and see how you relate to that concept of codependency. And whether you can, using this, what we're going to learn today's video, whether it can explain your anxiety or distress, the dynamic of the relationship, those patterns. Because I think your story can help someone else. I know that the power of collective intelligence, the power of community is extremely strong, and I'm very grateful, even though we're a fairly small community, if I compare with other channels, I wouldn't swap it with anyone. So feel free to share any insights, anything that you've learned, either working with me, either working with your therapist, working on this, learning about codependency in this slide. So the inner voice, this is how it's going to work. This is what's going on right now. It's basically defense mechanism 101, psychology 101. You have this fear of being alone, okay? Because in childhood, anytime you were alone, you felt rejected, that was really, really hard for you. And so that was, for example, reinforced over time. So I have a lot of clients who, for example, they have low self-esteem, regardless. And it's interesting because when you speak with them from a stranger's point of view, I don't know their history. Sometimes people are super good looking, really high achievers, successful in businesses, and they tell me like, I have zero confidence. And when you discuss, they realize that they were bullied when they were a kid. And when you're a teenager, there's a deep, deep, deep need to be part of the group. And when you are rejected as a teenager, it's awful. It's really, really hard because this is the time in our life where it's so important to bond, so important to feel that we are part of the community, That's why you have people wearing the same outfit. You have the gothics, you have the nerds, but you'll see that they all look the same because they want to be part of that. So when you're rejected, when you're bullied, it's really, really hard on the building the identity. It could also be reinforced by toxic relationship. And so you start with a bad relationship or with a traumatic event with a relationship, and that continues. So it's affecting your self-confidence slowly and pushing you to seek validation at all costs. Because you're not confident, you want to get that validation from someone. The problem is that what you're doing is that you try to fill that gap with a partner. You have this lack of affection and you feel what I need right now is a partner to fill that gap. And you create a potentially toxic dynamic because your partner might not meet your needs. Because as you're trying to get too much, as you're sort of sacrificing yourself, you expect your ex to do the same. And if your ex is, or your partner is secure or avoidant, it's not going to work. And he or she will break up with you. And you'll end up alone. And you start on number 1. Right? So it's very schematic. It doesn't always apply, but it's really about the function, it's maybe more than 50, it's more 50 steps than 7 steps. So it's really for you to understand the mechanism. Sometimes it's in the background. So over time, we sort of reinforce this idea. The codependency, see it as an addiction. You find ways to get your emotional needs met. Right? So you obsess on this, you obsess on the relationship, and you become addicted. So a lot of people who have this tendency to be codependent, they also can create addiction with sports, with drugs, and relationship. So they can't find themselves not running. You have people like they're really addicted to running, for example. And it's really because they want to escape something. When you're addicted to something, when you are an alcoholic, there's always you're using this as a way to escape a reality. And what you're doing potentially is that you're doing the same with a relationship. And you expect your partner to be the medium, to be the person who would help ease the pain and the fear. Now, what I'm going to tell you next is very important. The solution is not being loved by someone. That's not the solution of your problem. It's all about your inner child. Your inner child is the one who needs to be loved. Is the one who needs to feel safe. And your partner, your ex, will never, ever, ever be able to love that inner child. Because that's not their role. The only person who can love this inner child is you. This is where it starts. So don't try to find people to love that inner child. This is your job. It might feel overwhelming, it might feel difficult, it might feel confusing, it might feel lost because you don't know where to start. But this is the key to your problem right now. The good thing is that there's a solution. And this is why I want you to be careful when you have these inner voices, I can't afford to be alone. I won't find anyone. I need to be with that person. Those voices are trying to protect you. That inner child is telling you, if you want to be safe, you need that person. Therefore, you can't afford. So see it as those thoughts as that little child talking to you. You are not that child anymore. You have to love that child, this inner child. And read about inner child in psychological book. A lot of books on inner child. Read about that concept. It's very important for you to really engage with that inner child. Understand their point of view. And understand that you're not that child anymore. Right? Always assess whether it's love or codependency. Whether it's your inner child talking to you, trying to protect you. Don't get me wrong, your inner child has good intention. He thinks, or she thinks, that in order to be happy, you need to get that validation. You need to get, that's how they function. Right? That's what he was taught. You're an adult now, you can challenge that. When you see other people, you can compare with other people who are more secure, for example. That's not really the way life works. Right? And that's why it's so empowering to have also a relationship with a counselor who would be able to reflect, give you a bit of perspective, a bit of distance, or maybe it's your best friend, doesn't matter. It's really, really important for you to assess whether it's love or codependency. And I want you to be really careful about this "it will get better" fallacy. I see that every day and I'm upset. Because the idea of staying in a relationship that is okay, where you're not really happy, but hoping that it's going to be better, because you cling to this idea of the relationship, this is the best way for you to be in abusive relationships, narcissistic partners. It's the best way for you to be unhappy long term. So it's really, really important for you to understand it takes two to be happy in a relationship. You're watching this video, so you're doing the work, you're reflecting, you're trying to be better, to learn, right? What is your ex doing right now? If he or she doesn't see any problem, doesn't want to grow, doesn't want to evolve, you're simply wasting your time. Because you're chasing the wrong thing. You're chasing a relationship to fill that gap, to talk to that inner child. And you're failing to understand that that partner, that person, is not willing to invest, is not willing to do the work with you. Don't get me wrong. There are many cases where it's worth fighting. There are many cases where, of course, you should get back with your ex. But I want you to challenge yourself at being sort of gaining that understanding of codependency. Because in any case, if the idea is to get back with your ex, you need to love your inner child first. The only way to work is to challenge yourself to be alone. The opportunity is that now your ex took that decision for you. So it's harder, obviously. It's more painful. That feeling of rejection is awful. But remember, see it as a challenge. See it as an opportunity to meet that inner child. Understand this defense mechanism that's in play in your background. And just, seek for help, for support. Try to look in the comment section here and see if there's any story that will sort of bring a bit of light, bring a bit of joy, bring a bit of resonance to your own story. Take care of yourself. I'll see you next time. Bye. Get up, nah, I ain't a quitter. Toss me the ball, I'm a really big hitter. Big picture, I'm a straight killer.